Well met and welcome to Week 9, Day 3 of the Hearthstone Global Games. I'm Robert Wing, and joining me once more on the desk, my good friend and co-caster.
You know what? After Friends, nothing bothers me. So, because you said we're friends.
Oh, it's true.
So,
So her name's Cora. We are here 1 week after this one left in Stage 1 of the Hearthstone Global Games. Cora, very excited to figure out exactly who's going to make it Stage 2. Any big surprises so far for you in Stage 1?
I think there's been a lot of them. A lot of countries going into this that we thought would do very well that have sort of floundered a little bit. And then a lot of littler countries with lesser-known players that have done incredibly well. Mexico's sitting at 3-1. Belarus. Who knew? Who knew?
Yeah, I'm a Belarus fan. My walls of my apartment are now just
Belarus
full
flags.
Yeah, just more
wallpaper. Yeah.
cut out with the
It's a good one.
Very excited.
Let's
go ahead and take a look at the format for the Hearthstone Global Games. We are at the tail end of Stage 1 now, which is comprised of 8 groups of 6 teams participating in a 10-week round robin. Up next on the docket is Stage 2. 6 groups of 4 teams participating in a 3-week round robin. But the name of the game, the most important stage of all, Stage 3. 16-team single elimination with 4 teams advancing to a land finals taking place later this year. So very exciting stuff on the horizon for the Hearthstone Global Games. We have a very exciting set of matches tonight as well. USA could make history, be the first team in all of Hearthstone Global Games to actually go undefeated.
Yes, they absolutely could. And you've got some blue stars on your red bow. Can't possibly mean that you're rooting for anybody except for Canada.
Yep.
So here we can see everything shaping up quite nicely. My pick, Brazil, sitting at the top of the Group A standings. Happy to see that. United States, of course, will be taking on Peru today. Peru sitting at 0-3. No chance that they make it out of this stage, but still a win against the U.S. would be quite big for their overall demeanor. And then going into next year, if the Hearthstone Global Games happens again, that's a big deal.
Yeah, it's certainly good to get the infrastructure in place, kind of get the teamwork there, show fans from Peru that you should be voted for again. It is an interesting story thus far in Stage 1. We've seen some of the teams that came in here extremely confident. They put up their performances. They're advancing to Stage 2. Obviously, some other teams have not fared necessarily as well, and they certainly had impressive rosters coming in. On the upside, though, we have seen some of the teams that maybe people weren't expecting. Malaysia is a great example of a success story that really no one was coming in here saying Malaysia's got this. You know, they're a shoo-in for Stage 2, but they've certainly put up the performance. We see Germany there. That was a team that, on paper was a powerhouse team. Obviously, their attention's been split, for some of the players on that team, so maybe that's been a factor. But, yeah, it's been a story thus far of some surprises and then some expected results. So, nice, happy mix.
Yeah, very nice mix. We're getting it all sorts of experienced versus not as experienced teams. We'll be moving on to Stage 2. Our second match of the day today. There's still some serious contention within that group. Looking like it's going to be a lot of 2-2 records after this week, so a lot will be decided next week when the final matches are played out from that group. So there's still a lot on the line, a lot left to be decided, even though we do have quite a few teams that have already made it through.
Right, these last 2 weeks are going to be action-packed, but for tonight we begin with Peru taking on United States. Again, we talked about history in the making potentially for the USA squad there, coming in here and looking to go 5-0. Peru looking to just get a win on the board. Second match of the night, Singapore versus Taiwan. Singapore is still technically in the hunt, but they absolutely have to win tonight. They want to go 3-0, as match score is going to be a lot of what determines their tiebreakers. And even if they win tonight 3-0, they're still going to need some help from the Fates there to get through. And Taiwan, if they win it, will actually be tied with Mexico with a 3-1 record and be in a great spot. Taiwan obviously coming in here as one of those teams we were talking about that on paper certainly boasts an impressive roster.
It absolutely does. Here we can see the rosters coming up now. Peru represented by Nandieb, Kishtar, Izzy, and Uchiha Sasuke. And then the United States, we have Young Savage, Amnesiac leading the charge, followed by Dog, Firebat, and Hot Meowth.
Right, and that roster is just, in terms of overall competitive experience, it's really one that's hard to stand up against. Obviously, Amnesiac, if you've been paying attention to competitive Hearthstone in the last year and a half, just everywhere. Dog, certainly, we see him pop up at some of the regular American or North American lands. We saw him just recently at DreamHack Austin finish with a top 8 performance. Firebat, the 2014 Hearthstone World Champion, and Hot Meowth, we saw it just recently at BlizzCon for 2016. So certainly a very powerful roster there, and they're one that have come in competitive and looking to leave a stamp on the first ever Hearthstone Global Games, show them that, despite Europe having won the last 2 Hearthstone World Championships, USA is the powerhouse, at least in this particular tournament. Peru in a little bit of a different spot. You have kind of a representation of all walks of life. You have some streamers. You have some people out there who are open cup grinders. we've seen, for example, New Zealand, Pathra has really been kind of the binding thread that has brought everyone to the table and kind of made them work, and they've had success with that. For Peru, we haven't necessarily seen anyone step up as kind of that dominant Type A personality and say, hey, this is what we're doing. So really curious to see what we see from Peru. This is the second time we've seen them on the North American broadcast.
Yeah, that's a great point. How the leadership has been decided within groups really has had a lot to do with their organization, with who has been playing what classes. And here we can see how it's going to break down for this match. Of course, there are 4 players per team. Each of the players selects 2 unique classes that they will represent, and then it plays out like a best-of-5 blind pick conquest match would. If it goes all the way to game 5, one of the players that played previously comes back as the ace. They will then have the choice of picking the class that they did not play previously and that 9th class.
Right, so the ace match, certainly important, often determined series in the Hearthstone Global Games. Want to point out, you're not just seeing Dog twice because you really want to see Dog that much. Dog is actually going to go ahead and stand in for Firebat. I want to say Firebat's actually in France right now, so he'll be unable to make it. Gave us prior notice, so Dog is going to be able to sub in for him. And twice the Dog is really twice the good times for the broadcast.
Yeah, we get 2 times the Dog, 2 times the Amnesiac, so it's going to be just an America-filled fun fest. And Peru, of course, lesser well-known players, less prestigious team overall, less experience, but the USA has had a couple of very close matches over the last couple of weeks to teams that on paper it looked like they should have defeated quite handily. So there is a chance that Peru can really have quite an upset here.
All right, well, let's go ahead and take a look at the picks for game number 1. Amnesiac going to be piloting the Warrior. Is he going to be on the Mage? Now, Cora, this is super interesting to me. The past 2 weeks Amnesiac has played. He's played Rogue, and he went Quest Rogue into Miracle Rogue, now into Warrior. When we interviewed them in their last win, Amnesiac said there is certainly a premium to being unpredictable. Coming out of left field, and he's played Rogue last two times. Rogue's certainly very powerful. So you maybe think, okay, he's going to go with Rogue again, and then, yeah, the decks are different. Miracle Rogue and Quest Rogue function differently, but you kind of know how you have to approach it. Warrior can certainly be a curveball, as there are 2 very powerful archetypes that you may not necessarily be tuned to fighting up against with your Mage deck. Yeah,
Warrior has 2 very distinct archetypes that are very different, whereas the 2 Rogue archetypes are quite aggressive by nature. Although Quest Rogue is that much more aggressive, you still tend to combat them in a very similar manner. But with Warrior, depending on whether or not it's a Quest Warrior or a Pirate Warrior, you're going to need to mulligan very differently against that. So just the fact that Warrior has so many more question marks, so much more that you would need to do depending on which archetype it is, makes that seem like the better pick here.
Right, and obviously Mage, I'm going to go ahead and say that Mage in a format for a tournament at least where you don't know the deck list, Mage stands out to me as honestly just being the most powerful class overall. It's so flexible. We've seen so many different builds in Journey to Un'Goro. This meta has been one where Mage and Paladin specifically have feasted.
Yeah.
But I think with Mage, you could go all the way from Freeze Mage to a very forward-facing Aggro Mage, which even cuts the ice block. So very difficult to predict because unlike the Hearthstone Championship Tour, these players do not have access to the deck list. This is not public information. So everything they do kind of has to be a bit of a guess.
Yeah, those unpredictable classes that do have a variety of archetypes that are all quite good, but that are all very different, are very strong when you don't know what your opponent is playing. So for Amnesiac, the Warrior class does only have those 2 archetypes, but they're very, very different. Whereas Mage, you can sort of play all across the board. So it is going to be a Quest Warrior for Amnesiac and Izzy on... well, what could be any number of mages? They all sort of have these core cards. Pyroblast tends to flex in and out a little bit, but this could be a Discover Mage. It could be an aggressive mage that just chooses to run Pyroblast.
So looking at the mulligans there, you were talking a little bit how the Mage has to kind of pick mulligans based on what they suspect this deck will be. USA has been running Pirate in the past. We see this as Quest Warrior, but the Quest Warrior itself has to make some important decisions on the mulligan. That Quest is a constant topic of conversation within the community. Do you keep it if you're expecting the more aggressive Mage, which can certainly go incredibly quickly off the back of Mana Worm, Arcanologist, suddenly spiral out of control with Kirin Tor Mage and a Secret? It might be not something you keep. I think Amnesiac here has gone ahead and made the read that this is something slower and something he's going to need the Quest to win the game with. On the other hand, okay, so this from Izzy looks to be the style of Burn Mage that we've been seeing George C. Muzzy play lately. It cuts the Freeze package, it cuts the Doomsayers. Volcanic Potion and Flame Strike and Meteor are there to kind of bring the board to heal, but the win condition largely Alexstrasza, what you get off that Primordial Glyph, and then Pyroblast. So that seems to be where we're at for this first matchup.
That's a very interesting hybrid of several Mage builds. And just when you think that more Mage decks can't be created, the Mage experts go ahead and they find one that nobody else really thought of before. So this is a very interesting archetype coming from Peru. And then to your point of whether or not to mulligan the Warrior quest away, Warrior has a very difficult time finishing games without the quest. Against decks that your only goal is to run them out of resources, yes, you can throw the quest, and then usually you can just win on the back of your hero power and whatever taunt minions you may have left after they've run out of cards. So decks like Hunter, decks like Pirate Warrior, but against Mage, which can go the distance, and you do need that extra oomph to actually be able to close out the game, you're going to need that quest.
Very important considerations. We saw Amnesiac just go ahead and drop the slam there, bring the Arcanologist down to 1, cycle a card. Could have opted to just play down the Fire Plume's Heart. Did not have the Fiery War Axe. Obviously, that's the card he chose to draw. But against mages these days, you really have to be fairly cautious, because if they come out with that explosive early game, you really just have to be prepared to survive. And if you survive, a lot of times you're going to get there because Antonidas is not in the deck, so you don't have to worry about the threat of potential infinite fireballs, which is a lot harder to do outside of Quest Mage, but obviously there are some wrinkles with Primordial Glyph that you don't necessarily want to explore. So making the decision to just go ahead and get more cards and then kind of evaluate his position after that.
That really does also tie back into the importance of the quest. Yes, you need the quest to be able to close out the game, but when you do activate your quest and you get Sulfuras online, you sacrifice your armor up. So the Burn Mage, after it Alexstrasza's and it has, infinite burn damage in hand, then you may need that hero power to keep you just out of range of double Fireball Frostbolt every single turn. So Amnesiac's going to be in the interesting position of riding the line between needing to finish the game quickly, using the quest, and just needing to buy time and armor up.
It's certainly a matchup where you kind of have to watch how it progresses. You don't necessarily enter in with a definite win condition where you're going to say, okay, no matter what, I'm never playing, the hammer. I'm always just going to be keeping that hero power. I'm going to be armoring up. There may be a situation where you get the ability to activate the Ragnar's hero power early and just start putting the pressure on them. So you're saying, I'm not going to give you time to Alexstrasza me and try to burn me out. So Amnesiac and Izzy are both going to have to kind of navigate this match as it develops. What cards are kind of in the top 15 of Izzy's deck, and it's going to be very back and forth. Obviously, Armorsmith represents the potential to generate armor.
Yeah.
If there's Ally Armorsmith. If there's the regular Armorsmith, that's also a consideration. Shield Block is in there, but without Justicar Trueheart, you can't really just say, okay, well, we're just going to play the waiting game, draw Justicar Trueheart, and tank up out of range.
Yeah, it can only do you so much good. But we do see the addition of the Armorsmith in Amnesiac's deck. Maybe only one copy because we did see a Slam, and we do see Harrison Jones in hand. It's possible that he's gotten rid of something else and opted to put 2 Armorsmiths in, but there is the potential that there is only one. So regardless of how you look at it, there is a little bit of that extra armor gain. Amnesiac's going to need to be careful about when he chooses to make use of it because it is limited.
All right, well, we saw Izzy take 2 turns to deal with that Bloodhoof Brave, and then the Ally Armorsmith is going to be able to generate armor here. Want to point out the Spellbender off the Primordial Glyph. That's great news for USA and Amnesiac here because that's not extra burn. And Primordial Glyph has certainly across all of the mage decks really been the keystone card that makes a lot of things possible because it's very difficult to play around. Not only are you allowed to discover a card, which a lot of times you understand from the get-go kind of what you need to be looking for to win the game.
Yeah.
The reduced mana cost just makes it honestly problematic to try to play around it. And that's why we're seeing so many pro players are kind of starting to get kind of salty with the card.
It does make things quite troublesome. Spellbender could give the US a little bit of trouble if they are trying to execute a target, for instance, Alexstrasza or anything that comes out of Firelands Portal for Peru. If it were to try to execute it, then the 1/3 would actually be executed at full health, which is a very strange interaction. So it is possible that the Spellbender becomes relevant, but definitely very good for the US that wasn't, a Pyroblast or a 2-mana Fireball, because USA isn't going to be calculating 3 fireballs in 1 turn for 10 mana, usually.
Right.
That's just a bit too much to expect them to play around.
So Izzy here taking a lot of time to consider how he wants to deal with this. The burn is so precious in this matchup because it's what he's going to need to win. Realistically, Peru is probably never actually going to have this board in a meaningful capacity. There is a window early on where you can have the board, but that has already passed, and then suddenly you're dealing with all the Warriors' various oddly statted minions that are super hard to deal with. Or they're not pushing a lot of pressure, but again, they just stick on the board. They're going to get repetitive hits. They're very durable against cards like Flame Strike, so Izzy choosing to use a Fireball there kind of hurts because you want to keep it and just have that later on for after the Alexstrasza.
Well, depending how much Amnesiac chooses to play into Flame Strike this turn, Izzy's going to have a nice clear on the following turn. You do have both the Ghoul and the Whirlwind in hand, so if you were to play Ghoul this turn, for instance, just to gain a bit of extra armor, and then Hero Power alongside it, you would still have a Fish's Activator in hand, but you would be playing that much more into Flame Strike on turn 7.
We see the Harrison in hand, and the Harrison plays pretty reasonably into Flame Strike, so don't necessarily know that you want to pitch it out here when you could certainly probably just save it for the possible Medivh. Medivh is very common in Mage here. Obviously, Harrison Jones does represent with 5 attacks some degree of pressure, but kind of feels like a wasted resource. Wouldn't be surprised to just see Amnesiac go ahead and hit with the Ally Armorsmith, and then just honestly armor up again. He's able to push some pressure here. He's generating armor, and there's no real need to rush to get onto this board. Oh, just goes ahead and plays around the potential for Vaporize, too, because he saw that the Spellbender came down.
Yeah.
That was something generated off the Primordial Glyph, and Ally Armorsmith represents effective HP gain, so why sacrifice it?
It's going to be a bit difficult to play around if he does want to save the regular copy of Armorsmith as well. He may just have to sacrifice and go for the hit this turn and try to see if it is Vaporize, if it's Ice Barrier, for instance. Prince Malchezaar off of the Firelands portal is a very nicely statted minion and something that Amnesiac could deal with this turn.
You saw the Golden Dragon border, too, to tell you it was a legendary. It's like, oh, God, oh, it's just Malchezaar. It's just a 5/6. As you said, it's well statted, but...
He tries. He's a pit fighter.
Can certainly appreciate that.
Yeah, now, so he can go ahead and clear it off, except for the Spellbender.
Can still clear it. Can still clear it. Would require the Fishes there. And his hand is starting to run a little bit low. Will get the draw even with the Spellbender proc, so it will just go ahead and play the Ravaging Ghoul. And if he trades in everything else, he can go ahead and get rid of Malchezaar, but has to sacrifice the Armorsmith, which, you know, could represent potentially more HP gain down the road here. Choosing to value the Fishes more, don't necessarily dislike it, and Armorsmith probably wasn't going to be around too much longer anyway.
Well, Fishes, I would say, isn't terribly effective in this matchup, other than the occasional Mana Worm, Medivh's Valet, which we're seeing come on board this turn, and Arcanologist. There's not a lot of targets that the Sleep with the Fishes plus a Whirlwind effect can actually kill, just because this Mage build has so few minions. But that's also one of the ways that the Mage deck really struggles, because you do need something to get on board to start to chip away the Warrior armor before you're able to Alexstrasza and just finish the game in one go via burn spells. You do need to be able to get in that little bit of chip damage, and it's very difficult for the Mage to actually accomplish that. If it does have Medivh, then Medivh followed by a burst of spells would generate quite a few minions, but that's a big if.
Okay, so Medivh's Valet on the board now, capable of pushing some of that chip damage if it's not killed, if it's not blocked out by a taunt, say, Primordial Drake. So certainly a good thing for Izzy there to go ahead and get that established. And he's starting to collect a little bit of burn. We see the one Fireball, the one Frostbolt now. He's had to use a Fireball already. He's had to use the other Frostbolt, and he's had to use a Firelands portal. So there's not too much burn left in there. I want to say there's a Pyroblast, potentially a second Firelands portal, but the other option, I guess, is the Primordial Glyph, but that's really kind of what he's working with on burn. And Alexstrasza is not going to deal with the armor, so is he having to do some math here kind of on the fly and figure out, okay, what do I actually need to go ahead and get things done? Just going to jam Alexstrasza. I like this. Sometimes when you're playing this Mage deck, and really any Mage deck that's going to require Alexstrasza to be your win condition, sometimes you just have to, as early as possible, jam Alexstrasza if you have it. It's an 8/8. Maybe it doesn't get cleared. It's pushing pressure. And then you're just going to say, okay, I'm going to draw the rest of the damage I need from the top of my deck.
Well, let's see. If Amnesiac chooses to go with the Primordial Drake, he will gain 1 from the Armorsmith. He can then choose to Hero Power go up to 22 or... Okay, so 23.
He's really banking on the fact that this Alexstrasza is going to have to trade in the Primordial Drake, and that there isn't going to be something like a Polymorph, which we do see in the hand for Izzy. So assume it's going to be here a steady diet of Mana Worm, Polymorph, ping, and then just go from there. That 8 damage is going to be really, really, really impactful for Peru.
Well, there in one burst is your chip damage. Amnesiac didn't have any hard removal options, so played the only real line that was available to him, and there's only 9 damage in hand for Izzy. Along with the Hero Power, he's going to have 10 bursts next turn. Amnesiac needs to slow this stem of damage somehow. Needs to stem the damage, excuse me.
Okay, so Mana Worm will certainly be gone, but we see that Fireball there again, putting the Fireball into the Curator, just slam the Alexstrasza right into the dome.
Frostbolt, Hero Power.
Yep, that's going to do it.
Yep. And just as Elise the Trailblazer is drawn, No packs today, but a victory should feel quite good anyway. So Peru going to get on the board early with the mage build. Not much Amnesiac could really have done there, even though it did seem like he had some good armor gain going. Once Alexstrasza came down and there was no way to remove it, it just was not enough time to be able to build up enough armor to dodge that much damage. So Peru going to go up quick 1-0.
Right, and I like that from Izzy. You put down the Alexstrasza. Now, a lot of times you can say, okay, Execute could come out, Alexstrasza's dead, but it's already done the damage. In that situation, Izzy was just able to protect the Alexstrasza, use Burn, use Polymorph, and just go ahead and say, okay, Alexstrasza, if you survive, you represent 8 steady damage a turn, and that is just going to get rid of most opponents, even something as defensive as Taunt Warrior. So I really like that read from Izzy, and there wasn't a whole lot of cute tricks of that. He just said, this is what I got, and I'm just going to go for it, because the longer this game goes on, the worse my odds get.
Yeah, I mean, you're going to Alex on 9 anyway.
Right.
Any chance you have really to do that. And then even if you're shy on damage in your hand, you'll try to find the resources from there. So it's sort of an Alex and hope in a lot of situations. But in this case, the Alex was just enough. You don't usually factor in the 8 damage additional from the Alexstrasza body actually connecting to face. And it just so happened that it was able to connect this time, get the extra 8 damage, and it was enough for Peru to be able to shut out that game before Amnesiac in the U.S. really had the time to be able to do much of anything.
Yeah, before they could even get going, Peru just went ahead and put the brakes on for that one. So it's going to be 1-0 in favor of Peru. Next match is going to be Dog up against Nandiab with a Druid Mirror. So Druid is certainly, at least on ladder, a very popular deck. Right now, probably the most popular as the new season begins. Aggro Druid, Beast Druid, certainly very powerful decks that'll help you get up the ladder quickly. And usually, as that population rises, you also see Jade Druid start to become more prominent. Jade Druid certainly has a lot of armor generation effects, a lot of defensive tools that allow them to deal quite nicely with a lot of what Aggro Druid is playing. So it's kind of interesting that we see both of these decks coming out now. I want to say both teams, the last time they were playing Druid, were using that Aggro Druid.
Yeah.
It's super popular right now, incredibly powerful. It's got that powerful early game in the minions come out, let's buff them, Pink Bird, Vicious Fledgling, I just wake up every night and just have nightmares about. And then you go into kind of your mid-game phase with Living Mana and then, a Giant Hydralisk. So it's an extremely powerful deck, and we've seen a lot of success with it for many different teams in the Hearthstone Global Games.
Yeah, both Jade Druid and Aggro Druid have been well represented in the Hearthstone Global Games, and as you said, they tend to evolve as one or the other is being played more often because the Jade Druid does have quite a bit of armor gain. It has a decent amount of early game removal for some of the early minions that are played, but once those minions are buffed, Druid really suffers from a lack of effective AoE, and their single target removal for larger minions is pretty much nothing. You don't play Naturalized, Mulch rotated out. So in that respect, the Jade Druid can suffer against aggro, but if we're looking at an aggro mirror, this is just get as much pressure onto the board as early as you can and try to spiral this game out of control very quickly.
Well, we are going to see just that aggro mirror. One interesting wrinkle to this matchup that is at least a consideration point for players is a lot of these decks have kind of like randomly will have one swipe in there, and one swipe can be a difference maker. Obviously not when you get to the Living Mana turn, not when you get to the Hydralisk turn there, but certainly early on in the game, if you can get out a swipe there, things can be turned around. Both of their mulligans now, we see double Enchanted Raven in the hand for Dog, certainly worthwhile keeps. Living Mana and Patch is probably just going to have to go away. And then we'll kind of see what Nandiab gets in. Nandiab's opener is certainly a little bit slow for how you want to be going as the Aggro Druid player.
Very heavy hand for Peru. US, absolutely agree. Patches and Living Mana are going to go. I guess you only really want one copy of Enchanted Raven. If you can pick up a Firefly, for instance, that has more minion generation, more valuable with Mark of the Lotus, or just Mark of Yasharash to be able to buff up that Raven early on, draw cards, because you do need to hit your board buffs and simply the minions to be able to go wide on board. So all things considered, kind of relatively heavy openers for both teams.
Right. Unfortunately, we got the news that Dog, unfortunately, in this Dog double feature, we will have no camera, which kind of makes you think, why have Dog in the first place?
Make the world cry, why don't you?
All right, Raven going to go ahead and come down, and if it sticks, or as you pointed out, that Mark of Yasiraj is going to be a very natural turn 2, going to make that Raven a 4/4, which is incredibly difficult for the other side, the other Aggro Druid to actually deal with.
All right, so Innervate coming into hand for Peru changes quite a bit. If you Innervate out Fledgling, you essentially are sacrificing it to just a hero power in the Raven, although you are stemming the development from Dog. If you were to hold on to it until next turn. You could innervate out Bittertide Hydra.
I mean, you can put the Creeper out now, and then for the Enchanted Raven to get through the Creeper, you know that with the coin and Mark of Yasiraj, it's probably going to have to potentially also be a Mark of the Lotus in there.
Yeah.
And then, yeah, you get by the Tar Creeper, but I certainly like the idea of just putting out that Tar Creeper now and basically saying, okay, you need to have it. You can't really afford to get too far behind on the board. The Bittertide Hydra Dream is a nice one, but yeah.
It's a bit inefficient use of mana, but not too bad. All things considered, doing anything this turn is better than doing nothing. And Nandia will have to find something for turn 4, but that's still a bit of a ways away. So Dog and the US are running the Finja package. So 2 copies of Murloc Warleader, 2 copies of Bluegill, and Finja. Great for really pushing board presence if you can get Finja on 5, which it looks like they will be able to. Generally, you want to Finja on 5, Murloc Warleader on 6. You can then pretty much kill anything that the aggro druid has on their own board with your Finja. You can bring out 2 copies of Bluegill or the additional Warleader into Bluegill. And from there, it's very difficult for the aggro druid to bring back board presence.
Right, we don't always see anymore the Finja package, even as powerful as it is when you're just running double Warleader, double Bluegill. It's extremely consistent, but we don't tend to see it all that much these days, I feel like, in this aggressive druid.
Yeah.
So Dog has had it in the past before that we saw it the last time he played. I want to say he was actually on this deck again, and he had the Finja package, so very consistent from Dog, as much as Amnesiac is a proponent of saying, hey, we need to switch Dobbs. Dog's like, you know what? This plays.
Just go with what's good.
Yeah.
Go with what works. Rob, there is a fledgling that is going to get to attack this turn, and you never like to see that if you're on the receiving end.
You do like to see Hungry Crab if you're over on Peru's side. That is a card that is probably going to get some degree of value here. And, you know, certainly it's more designed to deal with Paladins these days than the some odd Finja that you tend to see. But it's got upside against the Finja package. It's got upside against the Totem that Shaman runs that generates 1/1 Murloc. So Hungry Crab, certainly a tech card that's always on the forefront of people's minds. But back to the matter at hand, as you pointed out, Dog basically giving Nandieb the ultimatum here. He's like, well, you can go ahead and go for the develop your Vicious Fledgling plan. Hope you get something good off this first bounce, but if you don't, you're leaving up that 5/2.
I do think you need to go for it. If you are Nandieb and you choose to trade into the Enchanted Raven, you're pretty much playing from behind at that point, because you know that Dog still has the coin, can coin out Living Mana or Bittertide Hydra next turn, and then you're going to be playing reactively for the rest of the game. So by choosing to play it a little bit greedy with the Fledgling hitting face, then you're ensuring you have some form of resources next turn likely, and maybe you can make something happen with that. So it's a little bit greedy, but you need to find your edge somehow.
Well, Nandieb did get the stealth, so that's something. Vicious Fledgling will get in at least one more attack, goes ahead and develops a 3/2 cat to challenge on board, just have something to do.
Yeah.
And as much as possible in this matchup, you just have to put out power on the board. You don't really need to get super fancy. You're not looking for any combo win condition. You just need to keep putting things on the board until your opponent can't deal with them. Living Mana certainly represents like the odd wrinkle that, again, you put it down, you go wide on the board. How does your opponent check it? But outside of that, it's just putting big, clunky, powerful things on the board and saying, do you have an answer for this?
It's a very straightforward deck. It's not trying to do any crazy things. Vicious Fledgling is about as tricky as it gets, to be perfectly honest. And occasionally you do see the tech choice of, you know, Hungry Crab, Galaka Crawler in a heavy pirate meta.
All right,
but the Finja 5,
yeah,
that makes things interesting.
Yeah, and with the War Leader in hand, for the most part, unless there's some weird stuff off the adapt, United States can guarantee a clear onto the Vicious Fledgling. But let's go ahead and see what Vicious Fledgling does with its second hit. Divine Shield, good. 3 health, good. Death Rattle, so, you know, summon 2 1/1 plants. It's not awful. But these are not really the Wind Fury he was looking for. You really just kind of want to go off with the Vicious Fledgling. The Vicious Fledgling is not a card that plays in moderation. It's just designed to go ahead and win the game for you.
It's not a very subtle card. I could see going for the Death Rattle into the 1/1s because you have Savage Roar in hand. Maybe if they survive, you're able to clean up some of the board with that next turn. But from Peru's perspective, this board looks safe from the Finja. You want these minions to be as highly statted as possible so that Finja does not activate this turn. We know that War Leader's in hand. Dog will be able, with Savage Roar, if he wanted to clear off Vicious Fledgling and get 2 of those Murlocs pulled out of his deck.
Yeah, it's definitely important to get that fledgling off the board and to start generating more Murlocs of your own. That's just basically like get rid of their threat, make your own. It's Hearthstone one-on-one or 101 when it comes to battling for the board.
101 on one-on-one.
One-on-one. Unfortunately, patches coming out of a cannon makes it an unfair fight.
Who brought patches to the party?
I've been playing so much Wild lately in prep for the Wild Open this weekend.
Isn't it fun?
It is, but
It is just a whole different world.
No, it's kind of the same world at the beginning of the season. You see a lot of
You can play Muster
pirates.
for Battle in that world.
Well, you still see a lot of patches in that world.
You can play Ship's Cannon in that world.
Ship's Cannon is a brutal card.
Don't you love that?
Well, I love it when I'm using it, but... All right, so Bittertide Hydra going to live, but Dog basically saying, all right, well, you can have this 8-5. How do you actually deal with the rest of the board? Even if the Bittertide Hydra just gets rid of the Finja, you're still facing down Murlocs that are putting out pressure. You yourself are taking damage off the back end of that Bittertide Hydra hit, so Dog feels like he's in a pretty good position with this lineup play. Nandiab has some tools to work with. Certainly the Hungry Crab represents a major upside here, but he has to go ahead and kind of get back on the board, and realistically... I mean, is the play just Hungry Crab Living Mana?
I'm not seeing anything else that's great. You can Bloodsail Corsair. You do pull your own patches. Then you can Savage Roar. And then clear off just as many things as you would with Hungry Crab. I mean, Face goes into the Bluegill Warrior. Hydra into the War Leader. Patches into the Finja. So I guess you do kill off one more thing with Corsair Savage Roar because you get to hit with your face. But Hungry Crab Living Mana builds up just such a more significant board.
I mean, you keep the Savage Roar, too. It's certainly two different ways you can approach this from this point.
You do need to, I guess, be a bit cognizant about how much damage Dog could potentially have in hand. You did just see one Savage Roar, but a second copy of Savage Roar could spell quite a bit of trouble. Not to mention, this just pushes a heck of a lot of damage.
Sure. Yeah, you don't trade with that Bittertide Hydra. It's entirely too big. You say, big boy hits the face.
I like this. How do we push 10 damage to face? We don't trade with Finja. We don't get to play Living Mana this turn, but Savage Roar is going to push just as much damage with Living Mana just because you get to trade your face into the Finja this turn. And there's no possible way that US has 22 damage backswing.
I was going to say, and then you're turning the table and basically saying to Dog, like, okay, I've just created a giant board, so that was certainly a power play from Peru, and now they're up 2-0 over the United States, and the United States might be joining a lot of the other teams who were sitting on 4-0 and thinking, okay, we got this 5-0. Suddenly, it might just be in the 4-1 column. USA is still more than qualified. Yeah, they're still going on to stage 2, so not the end of the world, but would be cool from a pride perspective to say 5-0.
I think it would just be cool to see any country go 5-0. Canada fell just shy, and I think...
Malaysia did too.
Yeah, Malaysia did as well. So Italy, I believe, is 4-0 as well, so they'll have their chance next week to be able to go 5-0. But just to see any team accomplish that feat would be fantastic morale booster for them going into the next stage of this tournament. USA has had a couple of very close matches over the last few weeks. They've had several 3-2 victories that have come very close to being losses for them. So it is definitely possible that we see them bring this back. But they've got quite a bit of work to do. Those were two pretty quick wins from Peru. Yeah,
as you said, it is currently 2-0 in the favor of Peru. As we can see there, wins for both Izzy and Nandiab. Next up, it is going to be Kishtar and part 2 of the Dog double feature. Dog. So Kishtar's got that warrior deck. Dog's got the paladin. Paladin, we talked about, just like Mage, is in a space where there's so many different flexible ways you can play it. You can have that kind of more aggressive style like Australia's Ender, who, you know, just loads it up with Grimscale Chum, Grimscale Oracle, just go really hard in the beginning, blow people out. Or you can kind of have that slower approach all the way to Malagos to Taiwan, who's running the Doomsayers, like the really slow approach. Where,
Control Paladin.
Yeah. Yep. So hard to predict what exactly Paladin is going to be. Now, when we have seen Peru play Paladin, it has been more kind of that just mid-range standard style, which is you see some early Murlocs, the War Leaders, you see the Rockpool Hunters, Tide Callers, but that's about it. And then it kind of transitions more into Stampeding Kodos, Primordial Drakes, Curator, that kind of stuff. So on the other side, Kishtar has the Warrior, and we talked earlier about how Warrior has two really distinct builds right now. So don't necessarily want to postulate too heavily on what those could be, but obviously, depending on what the exact deck lists are, there's a lot of potential interaction points, and no one class is just favored against the other on paper. Yeah,
pros and cons depending on which archetype for either class is represented, so hard to speculate who is favored here, just because control v control, control v aggro, aggro v aggro, it all lines up so very differently, which I think it's fantastic because it means that there's a lot of different interactions between two classes, whereas before we just saw the same matchup over and over and over again between two classes. A lot of Shaman mirrors, for instance, a lot of Pirate Warrior mirrors. Now you bring in Warrior and Paladin, and you could be getting any number of things coming up. So hard to say, really, when there are a bunch of different decks per class that are really, really good.
All right, so we can pretty much immediately tell what's going on here. Kishtar, very famous Peruvian streamer. If you ever have a chance to, go check him out on Twitch. He's a lot of fun to watch. He's going to be rocking the Pirate Warrior. Meanwhile, Dog on what appears to be, at least from what we can see, that more mid-range standard style of Paladin. We see the Vilefin Inquisitor, the Murloc War Leader, and the all-important Sunkeeper Tarim, which kind of give us a little bit about what's going on in this deck.
It still potentially could be a very aggressive build. Both the mid-range Murlocs that have the best of both worlds and the very aggressive Ender-style Murlocs will have these three cards, but my feeling is that Dog would like to keep it rather mid-rangey. He brought a Control Paladin list to DreamHack Austin, which, in Hearthstone terms was forever ago because the meta has changed very much since then, but Dog does strike me as the kind of player who wouldn't go full-out aggression in this case. But I very well could be proven wrong. Who knows?
All right, well, that's a pretty good opening hand for Dog, who's going to need to get on the board very quickly against the Pirate Warrior. When we talk about favored versus unfavored, who wins what matchups, Pirate Warrior is certainly one of those decks that kind of turns a lot of those discussions on its ear, because with the right draw, it just exudes so much power, even without Ship's Cannon.
Oh, Rob.
But we see Patches on the top there. And
Kishtar's not happy about that one.
No, he's taking it in stride. He's talking to the rest of his teammates on voice comms there, and he's like, okay, guys, only one thing we don't want to draw, it's Patches. And there's Patches.
Well,
I definitely do like
take it in stride.
I do like pointing out the Fiery War Axe here and just getting it going. From that Inquisitor exactly what you're going to have to face down, which is Murloc pressure. So just getting the Fiery War Axe and kind of taming the aggressive board while you set up to generate your own threats is usually just a textbook good play. Playing down the deckhand, sometimes there's an argument for it because you're like, okay, well, I'm getting a 1-1 with charge, and that's really what I want at this point, but you're not even getting that anymore. And playing Patches just into the 1-3 feels pretty bad because you know what's going to happen to Patches.
You know what? If you coin War Axe, the next turn you have 2 mana. Normally, you'd only have Southsea deckhand, so you're like, well, what do I do with this extra mana? Well, now you just play Patches. You get the same board state that you would have regardless, but you use your mana efficiently. Happy world. I think Raven would like that.
You sounded like a Hearthstone infomercial there. You're like, you normally have 2 mana, but only have 1 mana to spend.
I have 2 mana, but I only have 1 mana to spend.
It's your mana, and you need it now. Call JG Wentworth.
877 mana now.
All right, so Dog kind of in that same predicament you were just kind of joking about because he has the very good 1-mana play, but probably doesn't want to play it directly into the Fiery War Axe, so it might actually just be a turn where you go ahead and make a 1-1 Silverhand Murloc.
I like my Silverhand Murlocs. I like weaving in those hero powers as much as you can, but from Dog's perspective, he has, 3-4-5 curving out very nicely. Will that be enough against Pirate Warrior? Usually, no. They're going to have so much pressure, and with Fire War Axe attached already, the threat of an upgrade is very real, and that would cut down pretty much all of your aggression going forward. So you need to be a little bit worried if you're Dog. Playing out the Tidecaller does require a swing of the Fire War Axe being thrown in, whereas just Silverhand Murloc being played, Patches could have just traded into that. So you're really trying very hard to check this Fiery War Axe here because Bloodsail Corsair on 3 or upgrade this turn could really put your future turns very much in jeopardy.
It was very clearly Dog trying to debate Peru and to just go ahead and swing in that axe. Be like, look, there's this Tidecaller. You can't let that get big.
You got to kill this.
Yeah.
It's very threatening.
Now that deckhand in hand right there could be coming out and just go ahead and trade into the Tidecaller. Might even just play the Patches down just to get the 1-1 on the board. And you're not really seeing a lot of Galaka Crawler this much in this Paladin deck. So look, just go ahead and get it out there. You know exactly what your turn 3 is going to be.
1 damage is 1 damage.
We're not picky. We take all kinds of damage here.
I'm not taking 1 damage for granted, and you've got a minion on board. You're doing fine.
Yeah, you've kept that. What's really important here is that they've kept the swing of the axe. So Dog, once again, has to go into another turn where he's thinking, okay, I basically either have to hero power, which gets traded into by the Patches potentially, or just go ahead and sacrifice my poor little Murloc.
I've never heard that before, at least from you. Bloodsail Cultist off the top may just throw Kishtar off of his Frothing Berserker plan, because then he would be able to play the Berserker next turn while still having a swing of that Fiery War Axe attached to clear off, Gentle Megasaur, for instance, and then you'll roll right into Arcanite Reaper on 5.
It's really just an infuriating situation for Dog.
Doesn't
because he
it
really,
just suck?
He needs that Fiery War Axe to just go away. And this was just kind of that last-ditch scenario where it's like, okay, do we go ahead and just draw the Cultist and then buff it up to a 4-2? And that's exactly what happened. Kishtar getting rewarded by the top of his deck there a little bit. And now, yeah, as you said, it's kind of, welp, I basically have to continue sacrificing minions until the weapons are gone, and I can actually try to generate a threat.
I mean, and this is Pirate Warrior without Ship's Cannon. We're going to be seeing the Wild Tournament coming up very shortly that you'll actually be casting. There's Ship's Cannon in those Pirate Warriors. I don't envy you, Rob.
It's if you've never played Wild at all, I encourage you to just go find the Pirate Warrior list that has Ship's Cannon in it. It is basically the equivalent of typing Power Overwhelming back in the day on StarCraft. You're just playing in like a cheatery mode. But we see here, Dog now does have an opportunity to at least get rid of something with the Kodo, hoping for that 1-4 to go away.
Yay.
Does at least get that. And then is saying, okay, something's on the board. Surely there's no Arcanite Reaper.
We all have our dreams, Rob.
Yeah, it's true. I for one
if
dream
we all
of
lived in a perfect Paladin world where our pirate opponents don't have Arcanite Reaper, well, then Warlock wouldn't be the only class that was never played.
All right, so the Gentle Megasaur are going to be able to get some value here. Really going to need something big to come off of this. And Poisonous usually has a lot of upside in these types of matchups. You could potentially trade it into a Naga Corsair, even a Frothing Berserker or something. But you're usually using it when you have the initiative and you're saying, okay, I'm going to put the threat in front of my opponent. Like, you have to play something into this. Very similar, actually, to how you leverage a weapon. But for this, just going ahead and getting stealth, it's not ideal for Dog, but at least he can use that Megasaur next turn and potentially have initiative with something like Poisonous. Otherwise, it was just going to get traded into by patches, and really Dog just needs to stem the bleeding here.
Well, 8 from Heroic Strike, 10 damage represented. If you trade patches into the Megasaur, then you have 11. So 2 damage off lethal for Peru.
Well, Dog has a little bit of a bright spot there, seeing that Ragnaros Lightlord come up. If he can somehow stabilize, Ragnaros Lightlord certainly represents a lot of potential healing that could come in, assuming the board situation is correct for it. Your minions aren't damaged, and you can guarantee it healing your face. But we certainly do see, to your point, the damage stacking up for Kishtar.
That's often the situation that Paladin is in these matchups. If you can get to turn 8, you have a very great chance of stabilizing simply because you're not dead by turn 8. But it's a very difficult task to accomplish. The Hydrologist in hand means that Dog could net something like Noble Sacrifice, which would be able to draw at least 1 damage away from his face. Then the Megasaur, you're hoping for +3 attack or Poisonous on the Silverhand Murloc that's on the board right now to be able to take care of that Frothing Berserker. So a reasonable chance that he'll hit it here.
All right, the Poisonous is big. Go ahead, get rid of that Frothing Berserker. Again, the Poisonous is now also on the Hydrologist. Put down the Noble Sacrifice. To your point, you're protecting yourself from damage, but we see that Kishtar will be able to get through it quite handily, and then he has 8. Oh, wow. That is a lot of damage. Yeah, I think that's just lethal.
8, 13, 14. It's one off lethal because of the Noble Sacrifice. The Mortal Strike and Heroic Strike would represent the same amount. If you run your Arcanite Reaper into the Megasaur, you're down to 10. Then you have 11. Yeah, you're off a few points of damage no matter how you sequence this. So Noble Sacrifice, actually, Rob, that's a huge deal because now Dog will be able to play Rag Lightlord next turn, ensuring he heals for 8. Kishtar can still go all out this turn.
It looks like exactly what he's going to do. Just go ahead and make Dog have it. Say, I've got the Mortal Strike. I'm going to be able to just drag that damage. You can play a taunt. Tyrion doesn't matter.
Yeah.
You have to have Ragnaros Lightlord.
Well, will it still be enough? Because Dog can clear the board entirely. If he puts Kishtar below 12...
That was important there. Injuring the Megasaur was extremely important because now you're putting the Rag Lightlord to a 50-50. Now, okay, Wicker Flame Burn Bristle coming into hand protects you from the Arcanite Reaper, it protects you from Leroy, it protects you from a bunch of different charge minions, but that one card left in Kishtar's hand, you have to think it's Mortal Strike. You have to think it's Mortal Strike. If it's Leroy, you still potentially die.
I think I would be more inclined to think that is some form of minion damage or
Spellbreaker potentially.
Yeah, maybe a second copy of Frothing Berserker. I don't know that I would think that that's Mortal Strike. Wicker Flame Burn Bristle 100% keeps charge minion plus weapon away from your face. Rag Lightlord, you have a 50-50 to just lose to the weapon in play. I think Dog's going to go with the Burn Bristle here. And even if he were to play the Rag Lightlord and it were to heal his face, he'd be at 10, but he would need to not put Kishtar below 12. Otherwise, Kishtar will just have 10 with the Mortal Strike and the Arcanite Reaper, level 11, actually.
Yeah, it would still die to Leroy Jenkins as well off the top. So
we know that the only way the Dog lives is if he plays Rag Lightlord, wins the 50-50, it hits his face, and then he does not put Kishtar below 12.
We're both wrong. It's Curator.
All right, okay.
All right, just going to go ahead and protect himself from the Arcanite Reaper, and then another source of damage coming from the weapon there. Potentially would have also protected him from a charge coming off the top because they would have both need to be combined. But this is going to be a 3-0 for Peru. USA's dreams of going 5-0 out the window. Peru goes 3-0 and says, hey, we're on the board now.
Firebat leaves for 1 week, and
I mean,
USA just loses so much of the mojo, Rob. I don't know.
I don't want to be performance-oriented, but statistically speaking, in weeks where Firebat has not been there,
USA has gotten 0% win.
Not only that,
win
but
percentage.
they've gotten 3-0. Just
they
straight
got 3-0'd?
up. Yeah.
Well, you know what? It was bound to happen. USA is still going through to stage 2 regardless with a 4-1 record final that has been finished up and determined at this point. Peru, they're at 1-3 now. They got to win.
I mean, they still can't get to stage 2, but they upset USA from making history.
But you know what? So. They put in quite an effort. There wasn't really much that the U.S. could have done in these games. They were all rather quick. One or both teams had an aggressive deck, and it just sort of spiraled right from the beginning. So not much that the U.S. could have done. I don't think they're going to be too unhappy about this one. But for Peru, I think that might actually mean quite a bit. They will still have one more match if they can win their next match and go 2-3. That looks a heck of a lot better than 0-5.
Hey, I'm an Orlando Magic fan if you follow basketball. We don't make the playoffs, but whenever we get a win, we're extremely excited about that. Let's go ahead and take a look at how the series panned out, though. It was a quick 3-0 for Peru. To your point, I really feel like games 1 and 3, Peru, to be honest, kind of had the map out in front of them of what they needed to do. In 2, there was certainly a little bit more back and forth in that Druid mirror, but definitely the first and third game, Peru came out swinging. USA couldn't answer, and it's pretty much just lights out. Dog there in that final sequence, Paladin facing down Warrior, had decisions he could have made to block potential outs, but the only thing we know he could have done differently there was play Ragnaros, not set Kishtar to 12, and then hope that the Ragnaros healed him and not the Megasaur. So good read by Kishtar to hit the Megasaur.
Not playing a taunt there would have just been wrong. If you look at the amount of outs that Kishtar had in the Pirate Warrior deck, the amount of chargers is just much greater than the amount of Mortal Strikes in your deck. So looking at how Group B is shaping up, Netherlands has pulled into first place in the United States. Looks like they're going to be shoring up second for Group B. That's a bit of a blow for the U.S. not to secure first place in the group. But now Peru sitting on top of the United Kingdom. They will have one more match between actually them and the UK to decide who is going to shore up those bottom 3 spots.
If memory serves, actually, Romania has just gone ahead and cinched that third spot. So at this point, United Kingdom and Peru just 100% playing for pride. Yeah. But we have our interview standing by with Nandieb. Nandieb, congratulations on the win.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Obviously, coming into this, you guys were 0-3, so I assume it's a pretty big deal to go ahead and get that win.
Yeah, we kind of needed a win after losing 3 in a row. We kind of felt really bad, but finally we get a win. Hopefully we get another win next week.
Sure. So coming into this with you guys knowing you kind of don't have an opportunity to move on to stage 2, what was the motivation there? Was it just to get that win, or are you guys considering long-term how this builds to, Peruvian Hearthstone Esports in the future?
We pretty much didn't want to be last, so we pretty much want to at least beat the UK and be in a good spot. So we do our best each time we play.
Sure. So obviously you do have the opportunity to take on the United Kingdom and make sure you don't come in last. What's it been like in Peru, kind of the Hearthstone esports scene? Do you guys necessarily talk a lot outside of the planning phase, or is it kind of something where you just come together to discuss deck lists and who's doing what, and that's pretty much it?
No, Yeah, we talk like all around the week. We're really friends. We live like on the same zone, so we go to events, all, and we like make decks. Some of us go to prelims. We help each other to like make decks and all that.
Awesome. It's super good to hear that you guys are close. Cora, any questions?
Well, how has it been, really, this journey through the Hearthstone Global Games? Coming in, obviously, South America has had some representation globally in the Hearthstone Championship Tour, but Peru hasn't really stepped up to the plate as of yet, whereas, Brazil and Argentina have had that representation. So what was it like coming in and being able to get together and represent your country?
We're really happy about it, and the community is growing, and we're getting better players each time, which is like what we want the most. Is like we learn from the other players, learn from like teams like USA, Netherlands. You see their team comp is a lot better than like other countries. So we start learning, and hopefully we do better next time, and we do better for prelims and stuff like that.
Awesome. Well, anything you want to say to your fans out in Peru before we let you go?
Yeah, that we always draw patches, always.
It didn't stop you from winning. Even drawing patches couldn't keep you guys from getting a 3-0 victory. So I'm going to say that is something to be proud of.
Yeah, so congratulations, though, guys, and we will see you next week.
Yeah, see you next week.
All right, so we talked about could USA go 5-0, but Peru had things to say about that one.
You know what? I think Peru's motivation to not finish last was much greater than the U.S.'s motivation to go 5-0. So you know what? I'm happy for him. Seems like a very deserving team. They had a rough start in the Hearthstone Global Games, but picking up a couple of wins at the end, things could bode well for their future.
Right, and realistically, there's no matter. We like to talk about, like, who deserves to win, who deserves what, but there's no deserve. There's only scoreboard. So that's a 3-0 for Peru, and that's going to do it for our first series of the evening. So